Well, everyone, it's Shane Conto, your Wasteland reviewer, and welcome to the Development Hell Podcast. And this is the Movie Club. And Jim, Vinnie, Kevin, and I are here to talk about 1997's LA Confidential, which IMDb has labeled as a hard boiled detective story. This is a neo noir set in the 50s in the City of Angels, Los Angeles, in the wake of Mickey Cohen going to prison and all kinds of hell breaking loose out in this beautiful, perfect city that totally does not have anything horrible going on underworld. But this is from director Curtis Hanson, and this was nominated for Best Picture in 1997 and lost to the buzzsaw that was Titanic. But I'll get to that in a minute. But we're going to go around and give our general thoughts first. So, you know the drill. Well, first off, what was this your first time watching? How many times you've seen the film? And then what your general thoughts. Jim, you get to go first.
First time watching the film, I'd always heard about it. I didn't realize that it was an early kind of maybe career making role for a couple of these guys, including Russell Crowe, Guy Pearce, and Kevin Spacey. Of the three, I thought Spacey was the most, um, he had the most screen presence of the three. But the most relatable of the three was probably Crowe's character because he's kind of like, he's not the smartest guy, but his heart's kind of in the right place. He doesn't really quite have a handle on his emotions, but they're coming from a good place. And he's fucked up, but like, sorry, are we doing
We're adults
language
here.
spoilers, language tags? Everybody's kind of fucked up in that kind of classic LA tradition. I don't know where people got that idea where like everyone who comes to LA is fucked up in some way, but there's a very morally gray area. I definitely hear what you're saying about neo-noir as far as trying to categorize it, as trying to give it a genre. Um, I'm it's an uncomfortable watch. There's a lot of slurs. Uh, it kind of reminded me of our discussion on the French Connection. Like, I
Mhm.
think that's kind of how we led it. Like, this is an uncomfortable watch now. Um, but it's different in that the French Connection was supposed to be set just a couple years before. And this was made in 97 and supposed to be set in like 50 something, right? So it's a little different. It's more of a period piece. Not really, but it's kind of a period piece. I'm interested to hear which of the three cops you guys thought was the most interesting character, and whether you thought it would be better if it was made in the 70s. But let's not go there quite yet. I'll pass the ball.
Vinny.
This is one that's been on my list for a long time, and I'm glad I finally got the chance to watch it because I was enthralled by every minute of it. Um, I'm happy. I was happy this wasn't one of those movies that you hear a lot of people talking about because like a lot of the stuff that did happen in the movie, a lot of it took me, but a lot of me by surprise. Like there wasn't anything in it that I was expecting because of hearing people talking about it. I just like it's one of those movies where like you haven't heard a lot about it like in conversation, so like I really didn't know what was gonna happen. I thought I thought everyone was terrific in the movie. I was actually surprised. I was actually surprised by like the pretty high body count amongst like the name actors in the movie. So that's that was part of what was so surprising because you're like, oh, this one died. Oh no, that one died too. But but yeah, one thing I liked about it was how I know it wasn't used throughout the whole movie, but I liked how like in the beginning, Danny DeVito's character, he works for a Hollywood tabloid, and like having too much like narration can be a bad thing, but I think what this movie did well, they used it sparingly, like in the beginning, and like I liked how they used Danny DeVito's like tabloid sort of voice to get you into like this world to let you know what was going on, how things were run. It wasn't like your typical like it wasn't like a typical like narrator's voice. Um, and in terms of what Jim asked about wanting to know who he thought the most interesting character was, I won't go into detail just yet, but for me, the most interesting character was definitely Ed Exley, and I'll go more into that as we get more into the discussion.
Hush, hush. Kevin's not going to hush. It's his turn to talk.
Yeah, so this was my second time watching this movie. It felt like watching it for the first time. I haven't seen it since I was in high school. I watched it for a film class I took back then. I barely remembered that much of the movie, to be honest. It was interesting to come back and revisit it, though. I really like how they did the period piece aspects of the movie. Danny DeVito just kind of slips right into this sort of role really easily, in my opinion. I completely forgot he was in this. But like Vinny was saying, I enjoyed getting his, colorful perspective on the events that were going on in his little reporter mode that he was in throughout the movie. Tabloid reporter. It was fun. I really enjoyed the dynamic between Exley and what was Russell Crowe's Bud's
Bud White.
characters. Right. Uh, I remembered them the most coming back to this, and I think their dynamic is the strongest point of the movie for me. I really like how they kind of they're antagonizing each other, but they come together at the end. I like the way that was handled. It felt pretty natural the way the story was going. The movie was more violent than I remembered. Kevin Spacey was also a standout. There was a lot to like about it. Uh, yeah, it was really good.
So I'm going to lead with this is my number 37 favorite movie of all time.
Oh,
So like how many times have I watched this movie? That's a good question. Like 5 or 6 times. But I also watched this for the first time in the same film class that Kevin did, except we took it different years in high school. Because Kevin and I have known each other since sixth grade. So, but like, I remember watching that, and just being blown away by this movie. And this film, it's interesting because like this was Russell Crowe's like first big American role. Like this is literally his breakout role in the States after doing some interesting work in Australia and getting attention. And then I'm pretty sure it's the same for Guy Pearce too. So like this was like his first big shot. Obviously Kevin Spacey was an Academy Award uh winning actor
yep,
at this
Usual
point,
Suspects.
right? He did win for best supporting actor for The Usual Suspects. And also like he had one of the most shocking surprise appearances in Seven, like 2 years before this. So like he definitely brought the star power to this film, and it worked perfectly because Jack Vincennes is the star power in the film because that's his whole character. And also, side note, God, the names. Like this is based off of a novel by James Elroy. Just the names of these characters is like A plus. Bud White, Jack Vincennes, Ed Exley, Dudley Smith,
Lynn
um, it,
Bracken.
Lynn Bracken, and it just all works so well, and it just really brings together this story. This is one of those kinds of films that you can easily oversaturate a film with too many subplots, too many threads, and too many details. This film is like miraculously threaded together for me. Especially like I've watched it so many times that like I pick up on all the little details. Every time you see this film, you pick up on new things and build connections that you didn't realize were there the whole time. And that's what's so fascinating about it. The whole cast is great because like Kevin Spacey's a movie star. everybody else up to this point, and like Russell Crowe is a movie star. Um, I would argue Guy Pearce is more of a character actor. I know he's had leading roles and stuff like that, but like he doesn't fully like give off that leading man kind of thing. But like James Cromwell, who was also an Academy Award nominated supporting actor for Babe just a couple of years before this, um, which is crazy. He went from
I
the
didn't
farm
realize why he was so familiar to me. That's exactly why. It's Babe.
because he is the wonderfully lovable farmer from Babe, and then him in this movie is something else. Like Danny DeVito's great, David Strathairn, just so many great performances. It's crazy because the only that got nominated for an Oscar was Kim Basinger, right? I'm
Yeah, and
pretty
she won.
sure. Yeah. And she's so good in this. I love her dynamic with Russell Crowe. The story's just incredible. It's so enthralling. And Kevin, you brought up a really good point about how they all come together is so important and feels so organic in the context of the cases they're working on. And I would argue that, like, obviously, you can feel drawn to one of the characters more than others. They all equally have fantastic character arcs that they have to go on because where you meet the three of them at the beginning of this film, they're completely different human beings by the time that you see them last in the film. And there's such a richness in the character arcs in this film, which if I'm gonna pick one, it's probably gonna be Bud White. I'm also a huge Russell Crowe fan, so like I was drawn to that, and like Kevin and my wife Jess and I were watching this yesterday, and I just turned to Jess when you have that moment where Bud starts sharing like his trauma, and I just turned to Jess. I'm like, men will do literally anything but go to therapy. Uh, so it was definitely one of those moments. Like that character was been through a lot, and how that manifested in him, and also what kind of superhuman can snap the back off of a wooden freaking chair like he does in that one interrogation scene? It's terrifying. Bud's terrifying. Ed Exley's such a shit at the beginning of this movie. He is such an ambitious ladder climber and has to remember why he wanted to be a cop. And one of the best quotes in this whole movie is when Kevin Spacey's like, I don't remember. Like why he wanted to be a cop in the first place. I'm like, so good. There's so many twists. Some of the one scene, you all know what I'm talking about. It's the most shocking scene in the whole entire movie. I remember the first time watching this just being like, what?
Oh, with Cromwell and Spacey.
Oh my
The ca-
God.
oh yeah,
It's like, what?
yep. I gasped. I was like, what?
Just this film, this story is so good. And I love the period setting, everything. But I guess what are some of the things that you stood out to? Well, might be interesting. Let's kind of take each of the three main characters then. So like we have Jack Vincennes, Kevin Spacey, um, on the comeback trail in 2024, apparently. Um, he is, the celebrity cop in this whole scenario. And they leverage that to kind of blackmail him into playing ball. Because, like, this movie starts really rough with that whole entire racist brawl that happens in the middle of, like, the lockup, which also, Jerry Goldsmith's score is just like, it's very derivative of some of his other movies. Like, Kevin and I were like, wait a minute, wasn't that the Rambo score? At one
Yeah.
moment. Like, it's so impactful, but like, what are your all thoughts on this whole like Jack Vincennes' whole arc in this movie?
Uh, he had an interesting story, and I think for me, it wasn't making too much sense until towards the end of the movie. Like you were saying, a lot of these things thread together in a
Hmm.
really well done way. He's up to some seedy business, and I think we see more of that in that dynamic that he's got going on from Danny DeVito's side for most of the movie, and I think that was a good choice to get us into the world a little bit.
Hmm. Danny DeVito definitely horrible influence.
Right, you're seeing it from the you're seeing how the press is being affected by the department earlier on in the movie, which kind of affects everything because they're trying to repair their image. So I think that was a good way to do it.
It was a very interesting piece having this set during that time when the LAPD was trying to redo their image, especially when this movie came out in the late 90s when they 100% were trying to redo their image. Um, Jim, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say that we don't really, because he doesn't remember why he became a cop. Um, we kind of get the impression that I got the impression that maybe he came to LA to be a model, to be an actor, didn't work out, and maybe he channeled his anger into law enforcement. I don't know. There's not
Well,
really any evidence to support that, but like the fact that he doesn't remember and he's sympathetic to this younger model who's kind of co-opted into a homosexual liaison that turns bad, coupled with what we know about Kevin Spacey now, like there's a lot there, but um,
there's
maybe
actually a lot to unpack
there's
in
a
a
lot to
meta
unpack there.
in a
Yes.
meta way, seeing
Well,
as like Kevin Spacey was closeted for all these years. So
well, well, Jim, it's interesting what you said, like what you said about his character, like possibly having come to LA to be like a model or an actor. I mean, that could very well be a possibility because like the fact that he's still kind of like keeping his foot in the door of the entertainment industry by being a consultant on a cop show, that like that could be like his own, that could be like that could have very well been like the only way for him to fulfill his dream of show to sorry, that could have very well been the only way that he saw that he could fulfill his dream in show business is to be like, hey, like I know like I'm a cop, but I can work as a consultant on the show behind the camera and give my expertise to the actors of what I know from being a cop.
And he can put on the fancy clothes, the night the white dinner coat, and get to hobnob with fancy folks and whatever. So yeah. Vinny, I don't know. You kind of saw what I saw. I think in Vincent's character.
Well, with me, like the reason why I think Ed Exley's character is the most interesting is because, and this kind of goes back to what Shane said about how like the characters are very different from like at the end from what they are in the beginning. With Ed Exley, that's both true and false. I he's definitely the same in the way that he's the same person at the end as he is in the beginning is because he is very ambitious. He
mhm.
like he will do what he can to climb the ladder of his profession. However, the way he's different is because within that aspect, in the beginning, he's ready to rat people out in his department in order to climb the ladder, whereas at the end he's willing to cover up what his coworkers have done in order to have them like give him like better treatment in the department.
It's and that's such an interesting situation for
Yeah.
Exley because he he does the right thing by the end out of wanting to find justice. Because he could have just left it as pitting those young black men for these murders. Because he got what he wanted from a like moving up kind of perspective, and he gained the respect of his fellow police officers, which he did not have at the beginning of the film. But he found that like I need to do the right thing, and that puts him in a dangerous place. Doing the right thing did put everybody, all three of them, in a very dangerous place. And by the end, you're right. Exley is willing to to cover up and lie about who's really behind all of this, to move on and make sure that this gets all wrapped up. And he probably made some kind of deal to make sure that Bud was taken care of too in the end. So he could, do his thing. But Guy Pearce played this character so well too, because Guy Pearce can have such a punchable face. Like he looks like he'd just be so slimy, and it's just like him and his. It's so funny about the glasses too, because like him and the glasses, he looks so much like this guy will sell you up a river to make sure that he advances in the police force. And by the end, like he's still a really complicated character, and which Bud's not. Bud's not complicated. He obviously has some trauma, but like he's much easier to like understand and overlook. And we'll get to him in a minute, but does anybody have anything else they want to throw out about Jack Vincent or Exley?
Exley broke the bro code.
He sure did, and he
What'd you say?
almost got
What'd you
for it.
say?
He broke the bro code.
He got the shit kicked out of him. Like here, so one side note: who in this room would have no reservations pissing off Russell Crowe? I would not want to piss off Russell Crowe. Especially how Russell Crowe turned out in real life. Literally chuck phones across hotels and stuff like that. But
Forgot about that.
like I would not want to mess with Bud White. And they set that all up perfectly. And that scene is brutal in that file room where
Mhm.
you're like beating the shit out of him. He just straight up yeets the chair out the window. Sorry, not just out the window, through the window. Just like
And
crash.
let's not forget later in the movie when he's hanging that guy out the window.
Yeah, don't mess with Bud White. He's a blunt instrument.
At that point, I don't know how Exley trusted him not to throw the guy out the window because Bud White showed zero restraint from minute one up to that point in the movie. So
Well, to
that
be
was the
fair,
only thing I found
to be
unbelievable
fair,
there.
he didn't kill Exley. He didn't beat him to death. So there was some level of restraint there.
True, that was the turning point for him, right? Or
Oh,
was
you
the
mean the
turning point?
judge? The
Let
judge,
me ask
right?
this: was that the turning point, or was the turning point when he meets up with Kim Basinger's character?
Well, that's the first. Well, so
The
this
first
is why
cog.
this is why I like Bud White's arc the most because like Bud starts off as a blunt instrument that has a certain code. Like obviously he wants to protect women. We find out why through tragic backstory. But like he's a blunt instrument. And he's the kind of person, exactly like Dudley, James Cromwell points out, he's the kind that'll say yes to the questions I asked you, boyo. And it's just like, he will do what he needs to do for the police. One of my favorite things is when he starts using his head, and that, like, he shows that he's a competent investigator. And where even, like, the coroner's like, he's a lot smarter than I figured him
Yep.
for. Because it's like everybody did not take him seriously or completely underestimated him. And that first moment is when he finds Patchett and he finds Lynn. And like that's a big okay, there's more to Bud than there is meets the eye. And that relationship that him and Kim Basinger have in this film, Bud and Lynn is so great. And God, that's so tragic. Like where he breaks his own code and what he does. And the way that Kim Basinger just like collapses in that moment in the rain, it's just that scene hit so emotionally for me this time. Because like I really love their dynamic. But yeah, them connecting was the first piece. And then the second piece was when him and he could get past his animosity to Exley. And I just side note, I love when Exley Dudley's like, don't get near him when he's riled up. He's like, he's always riled up. And I would suggest not getting anywhere near him. And it's just like, damn. But like their whole dynamic is so great once it takes that turn and they're working together. Because they make a
I
great team.
I wanted to like the dynamic between Kim Basinger, is it a hard G, and Russell Crowe. But all right, the scene where he knocks on her door and comes back for the second time, he kind of starts putting the moves on her, and she doesn't really resist. And then he goes, "Why me?" I was like, "Because you're a cop in her house. Like, what is she going to do? Kick you out?" That seemed very strange to me, but maybe
uh,
that was just the 1950s
So
romance.
I'm not trying to make excuses for this character, but I think it does kind of contextualize things. Kevin, did I not say this multiple times while we were watching this movie? I don't think Bud has a single healthy coping mechanism.
yeah.
So, like, don't expect normal behavior out of this character. He's not acting in a appropriate way in any kind of social situation in this. And I feel like that's what, like, as the film goes on, him developing that connection so meaningful because, like, he has connections, right?
So that's
Like,
actually ties into what I was going to say. So the way Dudley was playing them through the entire movie, I appreciated watching it this time around because
mm,
he picks up on the behavior of these two people very early on in the movie, and seeing it for the second time, I appreciate it a little bit more because he's he's saying, okay, yes, actually, you can do your little investigation on these cops, to boost public morale or whatever, and then he takes Russell Crowe right under his wing and has him be his attack dog, and he's feeding both of them what they want to hear essentially throughout the movie, and that's one of the things that's keeping them butting heads with each other. I like the way that was done.
Dudley is such an amazing villain in this, which also, we're at the point we always spoil the movies anyway, but like, God, he even from the beginning, he's not like a good person because he's definitely that establishment cop who's trying to look out for the establishment cops. And even if he isn't like a straight up villain of the movie, he's an antagonistic figure who's uh really trying to play like protecting your own. Because, you have three different perspectives at that table between Ron Rifkin, the DA, and then the police commissioner and Dudley in
Right.
those moments earlier in the film. When you realize that Dudley's been a straight up villain this whole entire time, God, and that moment, which, spoiler people, when he shoots Jack, it's just like, uh, just gets you right in the heart. It's just like this man was trying to do good, finally, for probably the first time in decades as a cop. And he gets shot for it. But oh my god, the Rolo Tomasi thing, just dropping that in there, and then the whole when he brings that name up to Guy Pearce's character Exley later, and the close up of his face and the reaction and the music, it's just like, damn, we it's all out there now. We know what's going on here. And that's such a great turn in this movie. But no, Dudley is he has had to be playing chess with a whole bunch of checker players for decades. Because like he has perfectly maneuvered himself throughout this his whole career and specifically in this movie. Because like they do some sadistic things, like the whole setup with Exley and Lynn and Sid taking the pictures and making sure Bud sees the pictures. And it's just like knowing that he's going to kill Huxley with his bare hands. But he doesn't. It's the first time he showed restraint in the whole movie. Which, God, this just all plays out so perfectly. I love it.
R.I.P. to Sid, though.
That, oh my God, that's such a great callback, though. When he's like put on the black coffee, it's like Dudley. Dudley is like hush hush, and just smothers him and just like damn. There's so many great moments in this, but yeah, going back to Vinny to what you brought up at the very beginning, the body count for significant actors in this movie. There's a lot of people die.
Yep.
Like the biggest star in this movie. Kevin Spacey gets killed halfway through the movie. And then, like, I guess Danny DeVito is like the second biggest star in this movie. Realistically. It's crazy. And there's also a surprising amount of Australian actors in this movie, which I thought was like a strange like casting thing. Cause like between Russell Crowe, Guy Pearce, and Simon Baker, who's the young actor who gets his throat slit and was getting set up with the DA, they're all Australian.
Isn't he in a TV series like
The Mentalist.
the Mentalists? Yeah,
Yeah.
I knew the face, but I took me a minute to remember why.
He's in a new Australian crime thriller called Limbo. Almost did not recognize him at all. Middle aged Simon Baker. Would highly recommend it. Was a really good movie.
But you know, it's fun. It's funny how like Kevin Spacey, how like three. I mean, like his movie, like his characters really are like they really do present surprises in a lot of his movies because usual suspects. It turns out he was behind the whole thing. Seven, his character doesn't appear until like two-thirds of the way through, and you're like, oh, it's Kevin Spacey. And now you have his early death in this movie, and then you have him being killed off at the end of American Beauty. Like a lot of like movie surprises in the 90s like hinged on Kevin Spacey.
He was having a moment,
Yeah.
and he's having a completely different kind of moment now.
Oh my God.
Um, which it is very interesting because it's like I know for a fact my wife was having trouble connecting with Jack Vincennes just because it was Kevin Spacey. Because she's not the kind of person that can like compartmentalize that whole idea of like this is a character that this actor is playing. But it's very weird having not seen Kevin Spacey in something in a while, and then rewatching this and just being like, hmm.
I hadn't
Um,
thought about House of Cards since like before 2018 until I watched this movie.
I
But yeah,
think
it's hard. It's
That's when he
distracting
left.
knowing what you know about an actor, trying to separate, those two things.
and like that's the thing too. Like this film has so many great actors in it and great performances, and it's like it's really cool seeing Russell Crowe and Guy Pearce at the beginning of their careers because like this is before The Insider, this is before Gladiator, um, and then obviously like 2 decades more of work up to this point, and Russell Crowe having another exorcism movie coming out. Apparently that's his new niche. Apparently, um, but I guess, are there any other things that you guys wanted to bring up about the film?
How about the love triangle?
I'd like to think of it as just like there's a bump in the road there, and like,
Yeah,
bye, Exley, get the hell out of here. So like,
I assumed. What was Kim Basinger's character's name again?
Lynn,
Lynn Bracken.
Lynn Bracken. I felt like she was going to be a little bit more sinister. I didn't remember too much about her character.
I think she's one. What it's very interesting because like she's different than the
Yeah,
other sex workers as well because like they didn't do work to her or anything like that, and I feel like that's significant. Like that's not just a random detail. I think it's like they're like she's her and she's very much her and like like I truly believe like her whole entire dynamic with Bud was genuine. Obviously, I don't think any connection with Exley was
yeah.
genuine.
That's
I
what I
think
was going to get at. I agree.
I think she's appreciative by the end that he stood by Bud through that whole entire like climax. With also that shootout at the
Oh,
motel.
yes.
Oh my god. Also Bud White's like fucking hitman over here. He just messing people up. That was such an amazing shot of the creep guy looks down into the dark hole and just shotgun blast out of it. Just he is a one man wrecking crew. And that whole entire sequence is so well shot. It's so intense. So I'm like, has Curtis Hanson directed besides this?
8 Mile. And I think
Interesting.
and then well, it's funny because Kim
They,
Basinger played his mom in that movie, and then I think he also did The Hand That Rocks the Cradle.
I don't think I've heard of that one, but I have heard of the River Wild that he did before this in 1994 with Meryl Streep, Kevin Bacon, John C. Riley,
I
David
like the end of
Strathairn.
that shootout sequence because it ties into the beginning a little nicely. Isn't it Captain Dudley Smith that asks actually in the beginning it's like would you be prepared to shoot a perp in the back as he's getting away?
Mm,
And that's what happens to
Oh,
him.
you know what?
Yeah.
yep.
Oh my God, you know what? I didn't make that connection. Good
And he
Yeah.
catch.
barrels him down with that shotgun. Also,
Nice
side
little
note,
bit of
What
karma
were the
there.
questions? What were the questions he asked him in the beginning? It was, "Would you be willing to plant evidence? Would you be
And
willing to
to shoot a
shoot
perp
right
in the
in the back?"
back.
And there was another question, but they were all hinged on if you knew the perp was guilty, which is kind of it's very
Right.
gray in
Right.
and of itself, right? Yeah.
which to be fair, I don't think Dudley cares if the perp was guilty or not because that sure certainly showed throughout this movie. There's a lot of pinning on minority people in this movie, which also going back to Jim, like your point, it's like there's a lot of very archaic ways of referring to people, including Exley, who just reeks of like white privileged kid that went to college at that time, which wasn't the most common thing. And of course, he would refer to black people the way he does in this movie. I'm just like, wow, guy.
Well,
And
doesn't somebody straight up call Guy Pearce a wasp during the movie, or am I misremembering?
I don't remember anyone calling him that.
I might be misremembering.
he
You
definitely is
might
one.
be misremembering, but I feel like that's not far out of character of the whole script. I haven't read the novel. I understand it was a lot thicker than the movie was, and there were a few key changes made. So, as far as the novel goes, I don't know. But yeah, the language, I don't know. The language is difficult, but even like if in the 50s, if an educated white person was going to refer to an underprivileged black person, that might be the term that they used at the time, like,
Makes it feel a little more authentic for sure.
yeah.
Well, that's a challenging thing watching like you're watching this in 2024 and just being like, well, those are words. Um,
Like
and
watching a movie about slavery, you're going to hear some words you don't want to hear.
especially if it's directed by Quentin Tarantino. I'm gonna hear one particular word a lot. Um, and this is definitely one of those kind of, it's like even watch like I like just watching like The Departed and stuff like that, which isn't even like like this that came out in like 2006. Just Jack Nicholson casually slinging Italian slurs like it's the 1960s. Just like who just casually drops those terms in the 2000s? But
It's like
like,
listening to my grandparents.
Like,
oh, listening to my grandfather growing up was certainly an interesting thing. I know way too many racial slurs, and they all came from him. Way too many. And it's just like, you know, it was a different time.
I think Catholics and Jews were the only ones to escape in this particular film, which is kind of rare. Gypsies, travelers, nomads, also no mention. So
Oh, yeah, that's true.
my last thought that I'm going to say, I saw this documentary called The 7-5. It took me a minute to search it out a minute ago, but The 7-5 was filmed, I think, in the 90s about cops who were serving in the 80s. And the values haven't changed much from the values that we in this movie. Like A good cop is one that doesn't rat out his partner or the guys who are on the take or the guys who are dipping into the evidence room or what. Like you don't snitch, you know. And it's weird how similar that is to like a gang mentality to me. But like um, this movie could have been very timely because if
Well,
attitudes
I
were
think it
that way in
is.
the '80s, then you know
Well, what happened in the early 90s? The
In
Are we
Rodney
LA.
King.
talking about Rodney King and the LA riots? Yeah.
So like this might have taken place in the 50s, but like this is very timely for LA police, the LAPD. I think this was a really interesting time to release this film in the post section of that. And I'm not going to go into many details about this because I don't think it would be appropriate, but I had a phone call about a reference check for one of my former student workers, and they were applying to be a police officer. And I had a very interesting discussion with this person on the phone, because said person said some inside words outside on the phone, and I'm like, I don't know how I should feel about this phone call. Which that's the tricky thing about any kind of authority situation. People in power don't always do the best things with it. And this film is the characterization of like dirty cops trying to take over the drug trade and take over all organized crime in LA after they took down the actual mobsters, which is crazy how high this story goes up in terms of this. And it's and how it incorporated real life stuff because like Mickey Cohen's a real person and really was like this big time gangster. So it's fascinating. Jim, back to your point, I think this would have been fascinating if this was made in the 70s.
Yes.
Because like this would reek of this is a 70s film. And who would you have directed in the 70s?
Martin Scorsese.
I feel like that's probably the easiest pick.
Yeah.
Certainly would work really well. William Freakton would be an interesting pick, especially with the French connection. God,
Or
how visceral this movie would be.
or what about hold on. Let me look this up. Hold on one second.
De Palma.
No,
I
no,
was going
no,
to
no,
say,
no.
whoever did Dirty Harry.
Oh, Siegel. Oh, that would be interesting. Don
Look,
Siegel. That would have been an interesting choice because he certainly knows how to make a very complicated look at the police with like Dirty Harry and Magnum Force and stuff like that.
or like what about someone like Sidney Pollack? He did 3 Days of the Condor, or Alan J. Pakula. He did All the President's Men. Because like both those movies deal with conspiracies. So like I think either one of them would have done well with this one. But actually, I feel like a lot of big directors in the 70s did like movies about conspiracies. So, but I mean, that really just goes to show how well this movie like done in the 1970s, because you have like so many capable directors who could have like delivered their own spin on this story.
I probably would have put my money on Scorsese just personally because I think that would have been interesting. It would have been interesting him plopping his sensibilities into LA because like he wound up doing that with Boston with The Departed. Because obviously like he's very New York centric. He even dabbled in Philly with The Irishman. That was such a
The
weird and interesting experience watching that movie and being like dumping shit in the Schuylkill. I'm like, huh, I know where
the
that is.
The Aviator is the only movie that he's done that's taken place in LA, right?
I guess
I
so.
th I think so, yeah.
Oh, if he would have done what he did with the Aviator and used all those different like styles of how film was shot,
Oh, yes.
That would have been an interesting choice. I'm trying to pull up, buying time here, because what an interesting year for Best Picture this was.
Well, it was this Titanic, The Full Monty. Um,
Goodwill Hunting,
oh, okay.
Stacked
and
year.
oh shit. I clicked 1997 Ceremony
Oh, okay.
instead of 1998 Ceremony.
Yeah, did this
I
win any Oscars?
It won supporting actress, and then I think it won adapted screenplay.
Okay.
I'm gonna get on my soapbox for a minute after I pull this up. Okay, so it's Titanic, as good as it gets, The Full Monty, Goodwill Hunting, and LA Confidential. I'm gonna say this right now. This
As
should have
good as
won
it
Best Picture.
gets, the Jack Nicholson Helen Hunt rom-com?
Hmm.
Huh.
Well, The Full Monty's about a bunch of middle-aged working-class British guys who become strippers. What a
Magic
year!
they walked so Magic Mike
I
could
could run.
helicopter.
So, saying this right now, this should have won Best Picture. I have no bones about it. Like, easy. I think Titanic is an incredible feat of filmmaking, but that movie is flabby as hell. And upon rewatch, there's some ridiculously silly crap in that movie. Like
But
watching Billy Zane chasing them through the Titanic with a handgun is just like the dumbest shit. When I was
but
rewatching, I'm like,
but
this is so stupid.
but you
I
know
still love it.
but you know what you have to keep in mind when like this was still the time when the Academy like mostly rewarded like big like sweeping epics like because you had Titanic and then the year before that was the
Don't
English
even get me started on the English patient being
and then
Fargo for Best Picture.
and then
So
and then the year before the English Patient. I mean, not that this was a bad movie, but I'm just saying, like in terms of like big epics,
watch what
you
you're about to say, Vinny, about Braveheart.
no. I said it. I said this wasn't a bad thing. I'm just saying, like just to prove my point, and them rewarding like big epics. You had
Well, and then
Titanic, and then
Gladiator won like a couple years after too. So
yeah.
like, here's the thing.
It was a
I
stretch for a
didn't
little bit. Yeah, I get what you mean.
I didn't say I was surprised Titanic won Best Picture. I'm saying, in hindsight, I really think LA Confidential should have won Best Picture. But that's just me. But also, this is a weird ass year for Best Picture. Because, like, you have a rom com, like a British working class comedy, and like Goodwill Hunting, all nominated for Best Picture. And it's just like, in what world would like that combo of movies get nominated for Best Picture? I love Goodwill Hunting, but like I feel like most of those movies would be like people complaining like they only got in because there's 10 nominations now. No, not in 1997. They all got nominated, but I really think that LA Confidential should have won a lot of Oscars for this. But James Cameron was unstoppable. And also they did care about box office back then, and Titanic was indeed unstoppable.
I'll jump in on that. I'd be okay with. I would have been okay with this winning over Titanic.
I think I can say the same.
I mean, I would maybe also be okay with it. I think Goodwill Hunting would have beaten this out just for the
I would
weight
agree.
of it.
Well,
But
I'd be
uh,
okay with either one of these beating
but if
Titanic.
Titanic didn't win, there would have been riots in the streets.
It
People
was
would
a
Also,
have
big,
that movie.
let's
right?
also point out that Boogie Nights came out this year too.
Huh.
I keep thinking that was 1995 for some reason.
Burt Reynolds got nominated for Best Supporting Actor. How did nobody from this movie get nominated for Best Supporting Actor? Like, what did they not campaign this movie?
So you said it was the nominations were Best Actress, Best Picture, and what else?
Best Supporting Actress, Best Picture.
Supporting
adapted
Actress.
screenplay, I think.
I think it won
Okay.
adapted screenplay.
It got nominated for Art Direction, lost to Titanic.
Okay.
Got nominated for Cinematography, lost to Titanic. Um,
I'll give them art
oh yeah,
direction.
like It wasn't nominated for costume design. That's interesting. This did get nominated for directing, but James Cameron was not going to get beat for like the fact that that Titanic movie even existed is a feat in all of itself. So this got nominated for editing. Also, Titanic won. I'm trying to. This got a decent amount of nominations. Music. Jerry Goldsmith, of course, got nominated for this, but lost to James Horner for Titanic because, of course, they had they had a score category for original music for comedy or musical
Huh.
at this point,
Hmm.
That's a weird
which the
category.
Full Monty won for best score, which is interesting. It beat Men in
I've
Black.
never seen the Full Monty.
I haven't even heard of it.
It
Couldn't
beat Danny
even.
Elfman's Men in Black score, which is interesting. I'm trying to see that those might have been it. It got nominated for sound as well, but Titanic won. Well, yeah, Titanic won 11 Academy Awards, so like it won almost everything that it got nominated for. So let's be real here. This did win Best Adapted Screenplay, beat Donnie Brasco, The Sweet Hereafter, Wag the Dog, and The Wings of a Dove.
I've not seen any
Which
of those other films. Not a single one.
I've seen Donnie Brasco, and Titanic did not get a screenplay nomination.
Well, I mean, I don't think anyone was expecting a screenplay nomination for that.
I've seen films that get nominated for everything else, still somehow get a screenplay. One's like, how'd that happen? But obviously that was the Ben Affleck, Matt Damon win, which beat Boogie Nights, beat Paul Thomas Anderson. So, what an interesting year at the Oscars. It was only the second time that a film won 11 Academy Awards, and the first since 1959,
For
which
Ben-Hur,
Oh.
and then would happen again
Return
six
of the
years
King.
later. Yeah, I don't know if that'll ever happen again. Getting back that many Oscars, I just think there's too many films that come out at this point that'll cut things up. But anyway, did we have anything else we wanted to add about LA Confidential?
I said my piece.
Well, it sounds like we all said our piece, and thank you all as always for tuning in. And from Jim, from Vinny, from Kevin, and from Shane. Thank you as always for tuning in and always supporting the Development Hell podcast.